We have mostly economic issues, and that's why we have in studio this Wednesday a special panel. We normally have one newsmaker for the discussion of the day, but for the matters at play, we have a special panel of Tony Watima, an economist, and as well as FCPA Georgina Malombe. I had christened her and baptized her Mamboleo. Mambo ni mengi, masani machache. That is perhaps why she's a council member of the Institute of Certified Public Accountants. ISPAC is what you will see in the name tag that we will be giving her across the discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us this morning, and good morning to you. And the Kenyans who are watching will perhaps be calling in, and we'll open the lines in a bit for people to ask the questions that they feel wasn't clarified as to what it would mean, whether it's a fertilizer, whether it's the Unga price, because there was no mention to it, but what people can expect practically from an economic standpoint. I'll start with you, Madam Malombe, FCPA Malombe. What stood out for you in terms of impact from the inaugural speech by President William Samoei Ruto?
Thank you, Mark, and good morning. It is my pleasure being here this morning. In terms of your question, what really stood out, I think the President's speech was positive. It gave citizens hope for the future. It gave citizens, especially the youth, hope for employment. It gave the people in business hope for a revived economy and a couple of policies that the President will be looking at. So I believe that there would be great winners, especially the micro SMEs. There would be great winners, and especially the people in the financial services sector, because of making the affordable credit available for the citizens. But again, a couple of advantages to the farmers, because food security is one of those initiatives that we anticipated by year 2022 Kenya would be food secure, and therefore the subsidy on fertilizers will be one of those driving forces, and land policies to increase the amount of land that will be able to be put into use. So I believe those would be quite critical.
Right. Okay, those are just the highlights. What stood out for you in terms of impact in your view? Tony Watima, as you were watching, besides the theatrics and, you know, what happened with the deputy president as he was taking oath of office, besides that, and you made a lot of comments about it online, but on the economic front, now it's time to get down to work. The celebration is over. It's time to roll up the sleeves. In your view as an economist, the state of the nation that he is inheriting, is it in ICU, is it in general ward, or, you know, is there hope?
Thank you, Mark, for having me. So I'll say, I think from what we listened yesterday, the president largely captured the pulse of what is happening, especially from the economic front. The economy is not in ICU, but something almost heading there.
Yes.
And so I think he tried to capture that moment. And so one of the, you could tell from his policies, one of the things that will be driving his regime is about, it would be a pro-business regime. And so much of it will be the private sector, especially SMEs, who will be driving the economy. And so they intend to invest in SMEs through cooperatives and through funding, the Hustler Fund and all that. We are seeing also the government will be looking at how to make the cost of doing business in Kenya, looking at the issues that we've had from the port in terms of the other thing will be 1 million limit and in terms of disclosure in banks. So quite a number of things that we see the tone is setting is that we'll have a pro-business government, looking at also the subsidy in agricultural sector. I think we will see a government that will be investing in subsidizing inputs in terms of, so that to improve productivity. I think one of the biggest problems we have is productivity levels within the agricultural sector have dropped.
Okay.
And so that's one of the things.
So I just wanted to give an opportunity for both of you to give initial reactions to what stood out for you in the inaugural speech. Let's listen to what Kenyans were anticipating at least the expectation of the new administration under President William Samoei Ruto. Let's listen in.
Kwamba anajua shida yetu ilikuwa wapi. Ningependa tu kusema kwamba tuangalie uchumi irudi vile ilikuwa kwanza mwanzo. Na kitu wa kwanza ninaamini ya kwamba Ruto mwenyewe anajua mama vile anaishi. Manake ukishika mama umeshika familia.
Ruto kitu tunataka tu akuja aone karama ya maisha. Wananchi wanateseka sana. Hata kupeleka mtoto wa shule, ukipeleka saa hii as we talk, even school fees.
Nataka siku nyingine nitakuwa mdosi kwa sababu akitusaidia sisi vijana kupea sisi pesa ya kufanya biashara, sisi tutaenda juu.
Tuna matarajio kama walimu pia ya kwamba vile yameongea mambo ya bottom up, kuna mambo mengi ya policies ambayo tunatarajia tutahusishwa hata tukiwa huku chini.
Asitupilie mbali Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, wao karibu, kwa sababu wanaweza hii kazi wakiwa pamoja, na mara tahitaji yeye wasirikiane kama mandugu ili nchi yetu ya Kenya iweze kuendelea mbele.
To know that we're expecting ASLA's funds so that we can expand our businesses, and I believe it will have very favorable interest. We'll be able to pay it back, and it's the prayer of every person, every business person in Meru that that ASLA fund will reach us and it will help our business.
First of all, kile kitu tungetaka kwanza anzie nao ni kuangalia uchumi wa watu. Kwa hivyo wangu ningeulizwa kwanza, ningetaka aguze mambo ya petroli, sababu petroli ndio imebeba uchumi.
So let's have a reality check, and I'll start with you, FCPA Malombe. You've heard the expectations from some Kenyans in different parts of the country. Understandably, expectations are high to change the fortunes. Let's have a reality check on this. Will it be immediate? Practically speaking, some of the expectations that Kenyans have.
Listening to the citizens, indeed, a lot of expectations are there. We've seen the president make some pronouncements with immediate effect after the swearing in. When you look at the aspect of education and making education affordable, and especially the newly introduced CBC, you must have heard one of the citizens speak about education has become very expensive. And therefore, CBC may not be a quick win for now, but he did indicate in his speech that there would be a lot of public participation to be able to deliver on that. Of course, that time he did talk about it. Now, the quick wins, from what I see, he indicated that he will be introducing the ASLA fund, and this will enable the youth, the micro enterprises, access affordable credit. I do believe for him to pronounce that some aspects, some frameworks have been put into place, including what he termed as favorable business conditions.
Yes.
But one of those aspects that the president was so keen about was removal of collaterals. And I believe that has been a stumbling block because most startups, they do not have such assets, they do not have the muscles to be able to acquire the financial facilities that they would need to take their businesses to the next step.
Okay.
Fertilizer, indeed, that is immediate within a week. I think from that perspective, farmers are smiling. But what would be interesting in this conversation is the subsidy of about 3,000 shillings. How sustainable is it? Because I do believe for a bag of fertilizer to retail at 6,500, there was the costing aspect. And I believe for that subsidy to be sustained, we'll be looking forward to knowing the interventions that will make that affordable, because it seems it has been sold for a while at a premium price.
That's true.
Land policy, that may not come in quite easy, because for a policy change, that has to go through the parliament, a law has to be passed. But for the fertilizer, that would be quite a quick win. For the people in freight and logistics, those have really gained a lot. Of course, with an immediate pronouncement that all clearing and forwarding is taken to Mombasa.
Yeah.
I think that has revived the economy down in Mombasa, and also it has given a relief to the people in freight and logistics.
And in fact, he's headed there on Thursday for that. Just before you exhaust all the points, I just wanted to get the reaction of, you've heard the Kenyans, a lot of expectations, but we need to give them a reality check of what will be immediate, what will take a bit of a while to effect, and what can be expected for the future. He didn't make mention, Tony Watima, I want to bring you in here, he didn't mention Unga, which is on the lips of everyone, literally speaking, but Unga wasn't mentioned, but he may pronounce himself in the days to come on this. Fuel was mentioned, but in the sense of how unsustainable the subsidy that has been in place is, but he didn't give any word or promise of lowering the fuel prices, perhaps because at the face of it, reality-wise, the prices might be going up. Today, there is going to be a review of the pump prices.
Okay, so I think the things you mentioned, concerns about the cost of living, I think
yes.
what
Wananchi
have raised. I think the reality is that cost of living will not come down easily. There are quite a number of policies that need to be put together, and so the rollout takes a period of time before the effects come up. And so the problem with the cost of living is also at the other end of the coin is it's an income problem. People feel that their income is not sustainable for them to buy goods as they used to do before. And the right way actually is to able, for a medium term and long term, is try to raise income levels more than government intervening in terms of subsidy and all those kind of things. So the question that you raise about the fuel issue and the fuel subsidy, I think the president is right, it's unsustainable. And the reality is that in the budget that we have today, we don't have an allocation of the fuel subsidy for a long period of time, because government and IMF had an agreement that I think by November, the subsidy will be off the mark and government will not be subsidizing fuel. And so the budget didn't cater for that. So at some point in time, I think we will see the fuel subsidy being removed. And so the challenge will be, how do you navigate that period in time?
Yes.
The shock of rising prices. It will be a tough thing for the president to come in and your government is not able to cushion the public in terms of fuel subsidy. So I think my thinking is that they will have to renegotiate about that and try to readjust on how people absorb that. Because ideally, how the stabilization fund that ended up into a fuel subsidy issue became, that stabilization fund was supposed to be able to cushion the public in terms of absorbing the rising prices of fuel. So it's not a subsidy, but prices are able to increase gradually,
yes,
so that the effect is not as impactful. So you're not hit hard by the impact. So if the fuel was supposed to move by 10 shillings to 20 shillings to 30 shillings, so it grows gradually and you're able to absorb it in terms of business and people and households. I think that should be the model, that if you're trying to run out the fuel subsidy, I think we should gradually make sure that we run out in a gradual process.
Yeah.
The other thing is about Unga that you mentioned. I think the problem with part of that is much of production also. So we have a shortage in maize. I think that can be cushioned with short-term imports and the cost of production. I think those are the two main things that they should be looking at in terms of addressing the issue about Unga. But lastly, when I talk about the fuel, the problem is also with the subsidy is that it has an income distribution problem. Because what we do with the subsidy largely is that we are collecting money, and then that money we are able to give very few people who are the oil marketers.
Yes.
And so the people who are benefiting in the subsidy eventually are the oil marketers. It's not the general public. Because you're still paying it through taxes. I think the other position that the government might be looking at is probably reduce the taxes, because that means the public will remain with the money. So the effect is largely with everyone.
But then again, that can't happen, you know, affecting the tax change or tax regime on fuel, fuel products. That won't happen overnight.
No. It can happen. Okay. So long as, first we see this government has the numbers in parliament. What we need will be a supplementary budget. In fact, we are definite that the supplementary budget will be coming up anytime soon. And so if parliament has the number, the government side has the numbers, the Kenya Kwanza has numbers, you can be able to amend the law in terms of tax amendments,
yes,
and be able to cushion that. If it takes, the moment that passes into law, KRA has to effect, because that is the law.
Okay.
So there is, it will probably some weeks, maybe less than 1 month, and the effect will be taking off.
FCPA Malombe did bring up a point there on the fertilizer subsidy.
Yes.
And questions around its sustainability. President William Samoei Ruto has already pronounced himself, at least you can tell his attitude towards subsidies, and it's not something that he would want to sustain throughout his administration, at least economically, in terms of interventions. First of all, just to clarify to people, it is in effect from next week, but not necessarily throughout. It is for the short rain season, right?
Yeah.
Just to clarify.
Yes, the fuel fertilizer has a different element. One of the things that they're looking at is in terms of increasing productivity within the agricultural sector, which is one of the biggest problems we have in the agricultural sector. I think the president, it cannot say a subsidy will be a short-term thing, because it's never short-term. It's more addictive that it's very hard to remove when you put it in place. But ideally, as the fuel subsidy is very cheap compared to what we're talking about in terms of fuel and all that. An estimation of that pricing cost that is reducing by half is around 5 billion Kenya money. That's money that you can easily find within a 3 trillion budget, compared to the fuel subsidy that we talk about, almost 100 billion that is needed.
Yes.
Productivity, I think at the end of it, is what the government will be looking at, and that was one of the problems that we have in terms of food insecurity. So I think that one will be in place for a period of time before we stabilize our productivity levels.
We're from a heavily political season, and a lot of the developments in the next few weeks and months will be exploited politically for one agenda or the other. There is the call for patience in terms of things changing for better in terms of Kenyans. Whether or not you supported Kenya Kwanza, it's a thing of now supporting the betterment of the country. Speaking to issues like the subsidy and how it might be exploited and now blamed on the new administration, is it accurate, is it apt to say that the next in the next few weeks, when we see a rise in the fuel prices, it is because of this administration?
I think, Mark, we must appreciate one comment that the president made yesterday. It is a Kenya for everyone, and therefore that meant that statement an all-inclusive statement. He has appreciated there was the political season that has come to an end, and now it is work that he has to approve and also deliver on his manifesto. The citizens must give the president time to implement, because I believe for any leader to come up with such policy statements, there has been work done in terms of data. And remember, the president has been in government for 10 years, and therefore he knows it in out. And any manifesto was hungered on certain sort of information.
Yes.
However, when we come to the cost of living, the citizens must give the president and his administration time. As my friend has said this morning, it cannot be immediate, because a country, this is an administration which has to take this country as a going concern, and it is not picking this country from zero. And therefore, as we transit, as we get these hopes to life, we have to give time for policies so that every citizen feels I'm part of this good journey. But allow me just to speak about the Unga problem. I think when you look at the problem of Unga, there are two factors into it. One, there was no enough production because of drought. That was one. And then number two, an artificial shortage that was caused by millers and farmers.
Right.
I think this is the conversation that the president will be holding. And when you look at the subsidy around Unga, which we had anticipated that it will be coming down to under 100 shillings. Yes. It is that conversation that the president will be holding. I believe we will be holding a conversation between the millers and the farmers, yes, so that they may be able to release that to the market. That will now bring back the law of demand and supply, so that prices are set by availability, because when people hold a product, then artificial shortage comes in and prices tend to go up.
Right.
On fuel, I will say definitely it will increase the cost of production, and it will, I think it will bite more. Because
so you're anticipating a rise in the prices?
Definitely, because it has to be pushed to the consumer. When fuel goes up, matatu fares will definitely go up, production will definitely go up, and the consumer is the final, gets the final push for such price hikes.
Okay.
We anticipate to be seeing matatu fares going up once that subsidy is removed, and that may also cause a little bit of instability in the environment we are in, an environment that is full of hope.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Let's take a break at this point. When we get back, excuse me, I clearly need a drink of water here. There is the means of the effecting of the subsidy. We saw how Unga subsidy was effected just before the elections, and with the iron fists, especially to the millers, that they have to toe the line. And then just after the elections, we were back to the prices that were there before. And as well as a subsidy which is intended to cushion, help the layman understand, it's intended to cushion the consumer, but then the price is still going up, and it feels like then we are being punished for the subsidy that has been in place. It has been unsustainable. Meanwhile, the global prices are improving. What is at play? How do we explain this? And then the Hustler Fund, which seems to be what will be the legacy project of this administration, or at least one of them, when we get back. And our director will be opening the lines to you to put your questions through. Perhaps you're not too happy with how I'm putting them across to Tony Watima and FCPA Malombe. So stay with AM Live.
Mivida Garden City, a residential development within Garden City offering stunning 1, 2 and 3 bedroom apartments, unique amenities and an urban green convenient living. Call us today on 0722 123 000. Mivida, my home, my life.
Dust off your Subaru and upgrade your Lexus, because Coop Bank is now offering 100% financing on used cars. With Coop Bank pre-owned car financing, anyone with an income can walk into a second-hand dealership, select the car that best suits them, and get financing from Cooperative Bank. To find out more, walk into a Cooperative Bank near you for details. Terms and conditions apply.
Your generosity imesaidia kuignite a love for reading in our children. Nunua any Cadbury Story Edition packs, scan QR code, na generously share your homegrown story. Cadbury, there's a glass and a half in everyone.
Nation FM is the home of good music. We want to find out how many people in this building believe just that. So we're going to do a sing-along challenge, and I want you to come with me. Let's go check it out.
Sijui kanta una kesho, gani ngali na uwezo wa kuifanya, nitaifanya hadi mwisho. Mwambieni huyo devil. Mwambieni huyo devil. She even told me young girl. She saw the marks on my shoulder. Wasn't me.
Welcome back to AM Live. The lines are open now. You can call in and ask the economists that we have in studio. We have FCPA Malombe from the Institute of Certified Public Accountants, keen on matters economics, and Tony Watima, an economist, and I think golfer, you know, when he's not too busy with economic matters. So let's get back to the discussion. We were talking about subsidy. Help a layman understand, please, that the subsidy is brought in the name of cushioning the mwananchi, the consumer. Mm-hmm. But now that the subsidy is, you know, expiring, at least being phased out, because we have an administration that doesn't believe in the subsidy, implementation and sustainability of the same, it seems the prices will go up because this subsidy is being removed. And then what was meant to cushion is ending up punishing. Is it coincidence, or is it just how things play out? I'll start with Tony Watima.
I think the issue with subsidy is about is more politics than economics,
right.
Because rising prices have brought down governments, and so people are always careful about rising prices of general commodities, and we see that much of this comes during election time, or
yes.
when there is political temperatures that don't favor the current regime. So ideally what a subsidy is that government tries to allocate money in terms of cushioning the public on rising prices of general products. Mm-hmm. But the sad part is that it's still the public that pays that, because they use taxpayers' money to allocate that money in terms of cushioning the high prices or the prices moving high of commodities. Subsidies is not progressive. It only benefits a few people, and those few people are people that government pays out in terms of reduction of those prices.
Okay.
Ideally, it doesn't favor. It looks like a very good thing to the consumer at that point in time, mm-hmm. but in the long last, it's moving money from the consumer's pockets and giving it to a few people, which is creates an income problem, because you're moving money from many people to few people. Ideally, the replacement of a subsidy is always you reduce taxes on those goods, so that the money that was being paid in taxes will remain with the consumer. Okay. So looking going forward, I think subsidies are things that we need to get out of. It's unsustainable, but it's addictive the moment you introduce it, and it's very hard to get rid of it, because there is no day, the moment you reduce it, the moment you remove it, mm-hmm. is that it means prices will move up. No consumer will always take rising prices. Okay. And so when you bring it, you need to have a proper structure on how to remove it. It's very difficult to remove it.
As you respond to this FCPA Malombe, then could we just call it as it is? It was a political card that was being played, whether it's the Unga subsidy or the fuel subsidy, in the lead up to the election. Is that what it was? And then how are we going to get out of this?
I think it could be a blend of the two, because when you look at the factors that made a fuel subsidy available, they were beyond the Kenyan borders. One, the Ukraine war was one of those factors that brought about the skyrocketing of fuel prices, and therefore even the cost of doing business, the cost of ordinary mwananchi moving from one point to another became hard, and therefore the government had to come up with that subsidy to cushion it at that point in time.
Yet, is it coincidence that the fuel issues, Unga issues, come around electioneering period?
We may be able to say it was politically instigated, but also there were other factors around
at
it.
Play.
And because I believe even for the farmers to hold, farmers and millers to hold their produce at that point in time, it really needed to, you know, see which side would win our hearts for us to be able to release it out. And I believe at that point, that is how the subsidy came up after a conversation. But also remember, and I think as Kenyans, we also need to learn a few things when we try to take advantage of seasons and circumstances, because at that point, when the unga was not available, the maize was not available, the government of the day, what they did, they opened the tap for maize imports. Now, what did that mean for an ordinary citizen? Of course, there was alternative sources of unga, but when you look at it economically, that was allowing our own farmers sink deep, and also whatever we were holding in stock also become the opportunity cost lost on that aspect. So I think we also need sustainable policies that can be very inclusive, especially when it comes to matters that affect every citizen, especially when it comes to cost of living and basic necessities like food.
Okay, let's get to what might be a legacy issue or signature issue for the administration under President William Samoei Ruto, the Hustler Fund. Again, to the layman, this was used a lot on the campaign or the campaign period, and it seems to be an avenue that people can access credit or at least get support for their biasharas. Is that what it is, and how will it work from your understanding and study of this issue as an economist?
Okay. I think this is one of the issues that I took from your show yesterday, the discussion that we had. I think I was not impressed by the description.
Impress us now.
Okay. I think this is one of the things that this administration might have an impact in terms of income levels. And when you talk about cost of living, it's basically addressing it from an income perspective. You need to increase people's income so that they don't feel the rising prices. That is the best way to address cost of living. So ideally, what we're looking at here with the Hustlers Fund, first, we have a problem, and one like your show yesterday, the problem was identifying the problem that is being solved here
by the Hustler Fund.
The Hustler Fund. One of the problems we have is access to credit. People say that many times, but when you look at it and from research and all that, or speak to business people, especially small business enterprises, one of the problems is access to funds. Because first, we have a problem that within the banks give a lot of money to government. I think they make a lot of profit. The biggest profit margin comes from lending to governments.
Yes.
So they have very little incentive to loan to other people. The second tier that banks loan to are corporate ones, because they have less risks. From that two portfolios, they make good money out of that. They can sustain themselves, and they don't need to lend out to anyone.
Okay.
So ideally, I don't know if I mentioned in this show or the other show, one of the other shows, what Kibaki government did, and people say it's a miracle about how he revived the economy, is that he moved borrowing money from banks should not lend to government, but banks should lend to private sector, and reduced government from competing with private sector in loaning banks. So largely, banks were incentivized that you need to make your money by lending to private sector, not government. The problem we have with the Uhuru regime for that period in time, they went heavily in borrowing, and that included local borrowing, that they crowded out the private sector, and largely government was taking much of the fund. So what we are seeing here is that government will be looking at pushing more money into the private sector, increase productivity. That's where jobs are created. The challenge now we have is that small and medium enterprises, according to the setup that we have in banks, don't have collaterals.
Are we talking about mama mbogas when you say?
Yes, yes. Ideally, my understanding from the Hustlers Fund and the people who've drafted it and conversation, they look at people with a turnover of a year of around 3 million, not the top tier. Largely, if you talk to much of these kind of people, access to credit will be from Shylocks or from a relative, but from sources that have very high returns.
Yes.
And so the impact on them, on their business in terms of access to credit, so to expand your business, is always very expensive. So what this Hustler Fund is targeting is looking at how do we reach out to people within that segment of a turnover of 3 million to 5 million, even 1 million. So that if you want to increase your capital or you want to increase your goods, where do you go for financing? Government is able to not subsidize, but government has been able to provide a credit scheme that you're not being asked for a collateral.
Okay.
And so ideally, what we're looking at will be your books and returns. Every month, how much do you make? How much do you pay taxes? Ideally, we're killing two birds with one stone. We'll create business with formalization.
And expand the
and then you'll expand the taxes. At the same time, those are the people who are growing businesses. So that is the way to expand the tax base that you're talking about, increase productivity levels and improve income and probably create more employment. That's the ideal perspective to look at.
All right. And just before FCPA Malombe responds to her understanding of the Hustler Fund and what Mwananchi should expect in terms of how to operationalize, Mutembe is watching and would like to make a contribution, or at least throw a question to one of my guests. Mutembe, good morning. Where are you calling us from and what's your question?
Good morning, sir. How are you this morning?
Niko salama.
Hata sisi tuko sawa mzee wangu. I've been listening to this program.
Asante.
And I really appreciate the way the panelists are tackling some of these problems.
Shukran.
Now, I was in Ethiopia the other day. And we, for church activities, and I was surprised to find that the price of fuel in Ethiopia is around 50 shillings and 35 shillings for diesel.
Okay.
50 shillings for petrol and 35 for diesel.
Yes.
Now, the lady there said that one of the problems brewing in Kenya is the external factor, the war in Ukraine. And I said, let me call and ask.
Yes.
The war in Ukraine is also affecting Ethiopia, isn't it? Is there something we could learn from Ethiopia? Or is it just the politics that keeps sending things skyrocketing, things that could come down?
Right.
And also understand that when the price of fuel comes down, everything else must come down.
Yes.
So that could be the real true way to solve some of these problems. Maybe we should send people to Ethiopia.
Thank you, Mutembe, calling in from Meru. Would you like to respond to that?
Yes. Thank you so much, Mutembe, for picking that up. As I said, there are other factors, of course, the external factors that are happening. But also, when you look at our economy, the shilling continues to weaken. And therefore, when the shilling continues to weaken, it also has an impact of the purchase price of a barrel of fuel. Of course, I haven't checked on the policies in Ethiopia, but we also need to know what is the per capita income in Ethiopia as compared to Kenya, because those are some of the factors that can also be playing in Ethiopia that may not be playing in Kenya. We are in different stages in terms of economic development, and also that could be a factor. So there could be other factors beyond that. But we have to take note that our shilling is weakening each day. We are in different stages of development, the two countries, Ethiopia and Kenya, and therefore I do not have sight of the policies in Ethiopia.
Right.
Yeah.
Tony Watima, I think you remember when the Energy CS was talking about when there was a big fuss around the availability. There's a shortage of fuel. And then there was the implementation of the subsidy. And she even spoke to the price in Kenya to the effect that it's actually one of the best within the region in defense of where we are. Yes. So as you respond to Mutembe from Meru, his observation, he was in Ethiopia.
Yes.
How is that? He feels like we should be in the same in the region.
Okay, I think the CS was trying to play politics and PR about it, but we're not the best in terms of if you're to benchmark. But answering Mutembe's question, there are two aspects. I think one was raised by her. One of the problems that we have and the difference between our economy and Ethiopia's, we have a foreign exchange that is floating, which means it's determined by government by demand and supply. Ethiopia has a pegged economy. It's pegged on the dollar, so it doesn't fluctuate that much. Mm-hmm. So ideally, one of the things that we have within the fuel price that has been a problem, and that is one of the things that is addressed within the EPRA formula, is about the FX, the foreign exchange gain and loss. So they try to adjust the pricing. By the time the importer moves the goods here, they try to adjust that cost of foreign exchange to the consumer. And so we end up paying more because of the fluctuation of what we've seen. Our Kenya shillings hasn't been that stable of late. So that's one of the problems that has increased the cost. The second one is taxes. I think probably in Africa, we tax fuel heavily compared to any other jurisdiction. Mm-hmm. I think more than 50% of the pricing of fuel goes to taxes. And so that is the difference also between Kenya and Ethiopia. So those two factors add a lot of, in terms of costing, if you're putting the pricing model, the costing comes out of not the product itself, but comes from other factors that include taxes and foreign exchange issues. Okay, FCPA Malombe, now you can respond in terms of your understanding of the Hustler Fund and what Mwananchi should expect in terms of access, as well as the other move that is working on a new credit score rating to eliminate the CRB blacklisting of creditors. The import of this, the impact.
Thank you, Mark. I think it's good for citizens to take note of some statistics.
Yes.
Around 5 bullets. One, and these statistics are taken from the Kenya Micro and Small Enterprise Policy Sessional Paper number 5 of 2020. And this will link us up to possibly the President's thought. Mm-hmm. One, we have to agree that the micro and small enterprises make up to 7.4 million Kenyans. So we are around 50 million, so you can imagine the estimated MSMEs, and these are enterprises, not people, enterprises, 7.4 million. Now, that employs 14.1 million, and that accounts for 93% of total labor force. And we are talking of the entire country's labor force, and therefore, when we speak about MSMEs, we are talking of 93% of the workforce. Mm-hmm. So the rest of the workforce is left to the big corporates, to the parastatals and the government ministries. So that touches the nerve of the ordinary citizen. Number two, from the same paper, MSMEs account for 24% of the GDP, and that alone has contributed to a huge development, and therefore necessary interventions are required of that specific sector. Number three, and critical about the Hustler Nation, that 98% of MSMEs, they employ less than 10 people. And that is the crack of the matter. How can we be able to widen the gap in terms of financial inclusion, widening of the tax gap, of the tax bracket, to be so inclusive? Because when you look at the only sustainable tax that can be collected, one is only on pay-as-you-earn, because VAT and the other income, corporate taxes, they fluctuate depending on circumstances, and therefore with the financial inclusion, broadening of the tax base to this specific sector, that also speaks volume. Now, if we are able to scale micro enterprises to relatively bigger SMEs, you scale them from micro to SMEs, and within possibly a span of time, these SMEs, they transit to smaller corporates, let me call them smaller corporates, that will create massive employment with the Hustler Nation. And then number last that I think the President was alluding to and must have come to the realization is the mortality rate of these micro enterprises. In year 2020, in this sessional paper, 2.2 million SMEs out of the 7.4 that were already in existence, they were said to have experienced mortality rate. And remember, 2020 is when COVID hit,
yes.
With economic downturn for many economies. Many, especially the the MFIs and the Shylocks, they did not have mercy on the micro SMEs, and therefore many businesses were buried. So I think with this ASLA fund, what it will be doing, which will be a signature for the president, is reviving what has been dead for a while and continue revitalizing the SMEs that are there. But allow me specifically to talk on this broadening of tax. I think in Kenya we are really overtaxed, and that's a fact.
Yes.
Because even when you look at, if you buy a token of electricity, for example, I think there are about 8 taxes in there. Without mentioning the names. But there are other essential services that the government has not been able to provide, and they are basic commodities. For instance, water, drinking water. In Kenya, we do not have secure drinking water, and therefore the water processors, purifiers, you realize the excise duty has been, it has gone up to almost 6 shillings per litre of production. So it needs to look at the basic necessities that it can do a public-private partnership, so that even as the government plays its role, it also, the private sector is also helping it deliver on this mandate. But I believe the affordable credit for everyone through the ASLA fund.
Yes.
I think, I don't know whether the president will retain the women fund, but I know he's been very vocal about the gender issue, empowering women. I think with affordable credit, that will be a plus to the citizens. You will realize that, as Tony has said, most people turn to Shylocks. Shylocks a month, you can even, per year you can experience 300% interest as compared to the mainstream financial institutions.
Okay, we're at the tail end of our show, but Rotich has a burning question. He's calling in. Good morning, and where are you watching us from, and what's your question? Rotich in Nakuru, can you hear us? All right, let's move on because we're pressed for time. Tony, that issue of a new credit score rating to eliminate CRB blacklisting of creditors.
Yes.
In English, what it means?
I think that's one of the main things I've been talking about. I think we get wrong about how we implemented the CRB. First, we have currently the way it's implemented, the CRB is being used against the consumer, which should not be the case. Ideally, a credit reference, as it's called, is about getting a reference that you can understand somebody who is borrowing credit. How does this person pay his debts? How much debt does he have? So it's just cross-referencing. This is how much he owns, this is how much he pays debt, he pays it timely or not. From that information, a bank should be able to make an informed decision. Is this person worth credit, giving credit, and not even worth giving credit? How much credit can I give, or can that person absorb at that point in time? What we have today is that banks look at, are you blacklisted? Yes, I don't give you credit. Are you blacklisted? No, I'll give you credit. That is not how it's supposed to work. And that's one of the problems that we have, because majority of Kenyans are blacklisted. Even if government was to roll out this financing, we talk about Hustler Fund or whichever fund, you'll not access it because bank will not be giving. Bank is the intermediary. Yes. Because bank will basically look at, are you blacklisted? Yes. But ideally, that blacklisting should be removed. We look at a credit reference should be that these are all the things, even your water bills should be there. This is how you pay your bills. Okay. This is how timely you pay your bills. This is how much loans you've absorbed at this point in time. So are you able to sustain more income?
If you put on your binoculars, or if you use the binoculars financially and economically speaking, the Hustler Fund, the access to the small, medium-sized enterprises, should the banks be worried? Will they be shaking, or will it eventually be a good thing in terms of them reviewing their terms of giving credit to Wananchi?
I think my understanding is that the bank will be the intermediary. I think it will be very costly if government was trying to rival with banks. We've seen that government has not been good in managing finances, especially, we even have national banks, government owns banks, and they've not been running quite efficiently. I think the most efficient way is to run those funds through the intermediary of banks.
And I think it will be clearer once the Ministry of Cooperatives is set up,
SME
that it will be
that is
running under.
Finalizing,
is it, the terms and conditions that are attached to the credit that will be available to people through Hustler Fund, that term of now you'll be taxed because they haven't been taxed, is a good thing eventually for the nation in terms of more collection of taxes. But will it make people, stay away from this access of the fund, in your view, as you conclude your
not
final
really.
point?
I think it depends on my understanding how it's supposed to be structured. Is that basically show us your records. You want to improve your business. You want to move your capital from 1 million to 3 million. You don't have that access, but government will be able to give you access without a collateral and a cheaper loan. Give us your books. We look at your books. How much do you earn? How much do you get? So from that formalization, give us your business permits. From that process, we're able to streamline your business so that you're able to accommodate that kind of capital. From there, as you grow, it means that you're able now to pay taxes. The problem we have today is that we don't have access to capital, and KRA will be coming hard on you. So it's better now to remain informal than to be formalized, so that you avoid those kind of things.
FCPA Malombe, in your view about this and your closing remark in terms of the outlook?
Thank you. I want to align myself with the sentiments of Tony. No one, if at all you love this nation, nations are built through taxes, and that is what brings development. I see this aspect of taxation bringing a lot of professionals on the table. Having come from the Institute of Certified Public Accountants of Kenya, we see a lot of cooking of books for SMEs, and therefore once this is streamlined, we will be having authentic records, and I believe the Institute will be there. My closing remarks this morning, I think 3 things will speak to me to trigger the economic development going forward. One is revival of the manufacturing sector, so that at least we have a balance of the exports and imports, because majority of the services and especially products that we get are imported. And once we revive the manufacturing sector, a lot of job creation will happen. Number 2 is the president needs to move with speed to implement the land policy, so that we increase the amount of land that farmers can take advantage of for food security. In terms of health sector, that is a critical component that the president needs also to focus on. Of course, with a bit of, let me say, in his speech, he indicated that NHIF will be graduated, but I want to remind the policymakers that NHIF was reviewed the other day. So if we continue increasing it, I think it will be a big burden to the citizen. And I believe those are my closing remarks. But not forgetting the cost of education, quite high. The infrastructure with 100% transition to high school. The infrastructure in public schools is really wanting, and therefore the president also needs to look at other factors that also trigger the economy. Thank you.
Tony Watima, I'll give you a chance not to apply for a job, but to give advice to the presidency or the executive as they look to fix the economy. As an economist, what's the top of your list as we hand over?
I think I'll talk about what we haven't talked about, which is about the port being reverted back, port services, which is clearing. I think it's a good move. Because ideally what we brought back was high-handedness, that everything should be cleared in Nairobi. So we are taking back to Mombasa. But my analysis will be, I think it should be an issue about choice. If you want to clear your goods in Nairobi, you can do that. If you want to clear your goods in Mombasa, that is the best way to approach, because from a business perspective, people will tend to look at what best serves their efficiency and their cost.
Right.
So if it serves you in Nairobi, I think that will be the best way to improve the port services. If it serves you in Mombasa, that's the best way. I think that's my closing remarks.
All right. Tony Watima, economist, and FCPA Georgina Malombe, council member of the Institute of Certified Public Accountants of Kenya, ISPAC. Asanteni sana for your time. And time is money, and I'm spending Zainab Ismail's because it's her time now to take over on Your World. And she's speaking about healing and forgiveness, and she won't forgive me if I keep talking. So good morning, Zainab, and take over. Who are we talking to today?
All right, well, very good morning, Mark. I mean, so today we want to open this space. It's going to be a safe space to have a conversation on healing and forgiveness.
All right.
But basically looking at conflict within the family setup. So how that goes. Just a quick one. Remember when you were in school, primary school, and you look like you were quite a troublemaker. Nah. So perhaps you had some sort of, an altercation with a classmate there.
Yeah.
And the teacher would call you and say, you know what, say you're sorry. I'm sorry. And the other classmate would be like, I'm sorry.
Yes.
But you didn't really mean that, right?
Right.
But when you grow up and within a family setup, there's so many things that can happen. The dynamic is quite different there.
Okay.
Disappointments and all these things. So then how do you move from there? So
and
that...
to be honest, and I mean it, I'm sorry for eating into your time, Zainab Ismail.
Right.
Do you forgive me?
I'll have to think about that.
You have to lead
Tough
by
journey.
example. That's
Tough journey. All right,
All right.
So that is the conversation we will be having this morning with my panelists. All right, stay with us.
Good morning.
Good morning.